Hi everyone, and welcome back to our next fantastic panel. For those of you that were able to join us this morning, I hope you enjoyed it. And those of you that did see it, you'll know that this panel is pretty relevant to some of the topics that were raised. So we have our next panel, defining Femtech as its own innovative, distinct market. What's the value in a name? So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to the moderator. Annemijn, it's over to you.
Thank you, Becky. Hello, everybody. I'm Annemijn Eschauzier, and it's my real pleasure to moderate this panel this afternoon. In women's health and Femtech, there's enormous need, there's enormous innovation, and I'm really pleased that we have three wonderful entrepreneurs in this space who will share their experiences and their insights with us. So let's get started. So Femtech, what's the value in a name? Obviously, it came up this morning, and that's where we're going to start. So maybe, Keren, I can ask you to go first and give your views, and then we'll go with the other panelists.
Sure. Hi, Annemijn. It's great to be here. My name is Keren. I'm the CEO of Ocon Healthcare. We develop drug delivery to the uterus. Femtech. I have to admit that I shy away from that name a little bit. Makes me feel like it's a niche, which we are not. We're actually 50+% of this population. I like to look at, and you'll see, my colleagues here with me, we all do very different things in women's health, not necessarily in Femtech. It really puts a little bit of a blunt technology base to it. And I really think we deal with a lot of issues around women's health that it's best to really pertain to us as women's health. That is my position on this name.
Thank you, Keren. And yes, a niche of more than half the world population seems a little bit contradictory in itself. Lea, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Just by way of introduction, my name is Lea. I'm the CEO of a company called Ava, and we're in the AI-driven fertility space. We basically help couples have babies. That's our mission. The thing with this name is we've been around for a while, and Elina will be able to speak to that too. I feel like we're a bit the old school people in this industry by now, by having companies. At least Ava is 7 years old, but that was really kind of at the beginning of the emergence of this space. So I remember really well when Ida from Clue first really kind of coined the term Femtech. And I think it's really important. I think us not really liking this term anymore is partly because the times have changed. But at the time when Ida started introducing this term, it was really important because we did fall in between so many categories at that point that I think big shout out to Ida. It was really important at that time to do this. Now, 7 years later or 6 years later, I agree. I wouldn't want to use the term Femtech anymore, but mostly because we're now so strongly focused on healthcare and women's health that I think it starts to be confusing for investors on whether are we looking at tech investors, are we looking at healthcare investors, where does this whole space fall? And in a way, it gives everyone an excuse to not look at it or to not have it really in their funding thesis because it might be too tech or it might be too healthcare. So I think by now, yes, I'm a much bigger fan of women's health overall because healthcare has to become tech-driven, so that makes sense. But I just do want to also remind us of the fact that that term was really important a couple of years ago to shape an entire industry.
I think that's a very important point, Lea, and thank you for making it. I mean, in the past sort of 6 years or so, an enormous amount has happened in this space. And it's good to be reminded that it was, from your experience, very relevant at the time, but now we're ready for a broader definition. Wonderful. Elina.
Yes, hi, I'm Elina Berglund, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Natural Cycles. And we're the first and only FDA cleared and CE mark birth control app, but we also have a broader vision around pioneering women's health with research and passion. And yes, I agree with the previous panelists that I do think that creating a separate term like Femtech was very important to make a statement that this is actually a thing. And I think, as you know, women's health has been under-researched and underserved for so long, and we're finally starting to see a change in this, and a lot of innovation is happening and a lot of funding is coming to this space, but I think still not enough, and we still have a long way to go here. So yeah, technology, I think, is also in general something that's a term that has broadened over the years. So whether you say women's health or Femtech, I think talking about it, raising awareness, raising money, innovating in the space is what's really important.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I'm sure we all couldn't agree more. And that's a nice segue into the second topic, which is about funding. I'd like to really hear a little bit more from you guys. You know, it's growing strongly in this space, but more is needed. Elina, you referenced that already. So what more needs to be done, and what can we do collectively, and what help do we need to ensure the funding increases in this space? Lea, maybe I can start with you.
Yeah, I actually do think it has quite a lot to do with your first question. So it's an interesting one. You know, I do think in the end, if we really want to see innovation in space, it's innovation in healthcare. And healthcare by design is expensive. Innovation is expensive. It takes a long time. You have to run clinical trials. You have to get regulatory approvals. It's not, and so by innovating in space, you have to do everything as any other healthcare company would do it. And I think that's where the name starts to be confusing, because when we look at Femtech, people expect the growth curves and the cost efficiency of tech companies in a space that really is a healthcare space. And I think that's what leads to conflicts here, because it's then in the end more expensive and less fast growing probably than the tech world that companies would look at traditionally. And I think it's a super attractive space to innovate in and to invest in. But again, it's because it's a healthcare track. It's not just a tech track. So I think what we need is an understanding of that. And we need more companies that flow into the space that are actually innovating on healthcare. Because I'm personally extremely excited about the amount of deal flow that I personally have on my table in the women's health space. It's a ton. It's much more than has been there in the last years. Like, honestly, I've looked at more deals probably this summer than I have in the whole year of 2018. But I also feel like a lot of companies try to come in again as a tech solution. So they're putting kind of a nice layer on something, or they build yet another app, or they add a little tiny thing. Whereas I think what we really need in the space is innovation in healthcare, and it's going to be expensive. It's going to take a while, but it's going to have real results in the long run.
Yeah, I totally agree with Lea, Annemijn, if I may. I think what we see in this space is a lot of young and little companies with great ideas, but they all have very small or very specific areas of interest, which makes it also a little harder to invest, because these requirements are sometimes very small amounts of money, but very many. And when you look at the bigger investors, it's a little hard for them to do smaller amounts of investments in many companies. They prefer to do bigger investments in larger companies. So that's one thing I absolutely agree. The other thing I think is super important, and I see this with OCON as well, we have to build platforms that allow us to be able to introduce therapies, diagnostics, apps even, that cater to an array of women's health conditions. This is one thing that we've done at OCON since I took the reins. We were very focused on one product. But at the end of the day, if you look at this delivery ball, where you can put on targets of therapies that really cater to multi-billion-dollar markets, you really build something that has a pipeline that really caters to a much more interesting type of field. Last but not least, I think that when we look at investors and investments and women's health, we have to help each other. When Lea and Elina exit, right, this will also affect OCON. And when OCON exits, this will also affect the other, companies in the space, because we'll create a lot more attractive kind of flow towards deals in women's health. So we have to create a lot more success. We have to help each other to make sure that we all bring investors that have already invested in the space, or new investors that are interested in the space, and really come together and say, you know what, if there's an investor that I spoke to who's not really into, let's say, a device or a drug, but he's looking for something that's more AI, or perhaps something that's a little bit more diagnostics, then we have all the companies and we can say, you know what, here's my colleague, and put those two together. So we really, really have to help each other to make sure that this space gets a lot of attraction and traction and successes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think, we're starting to see more and more traction also through a lot of great companies in this space. I do think it's still an issue, though, that's most tech investors are men. So it still takes a lot of explaining to do why women's health is, a problem worth solving, or a place where a lot of innovation is still needed. I think also, unfortunately, large pharmaceutical companies often have a tendency to prioritize men's health over women's health, also because of the leaders being mainly men. So that's also why I feel like tech solutions are needed to compensate for that. And I think it's good that there are small, interesting tech companies coming up, because some of them will make it, and that will make things bubble and sizzle, and then it will lead to more traction in the end. And I think we're seeing this happening right now.
One thing to add here is that, I actually think we're more on the radar than ever before. So I'm unsure. I think my situations with male investors have completely changed 5 years ago to what they are today. But I also understand and appreciate that fertility is one of the spaces within women's health that has more of an attraction to all genders. And I think the other thing that you kind of alluded to right now, Keren, is that we are starting to see exits. And I think we're still at the very early stage of seeing exits, but we're starting to see exits. And that's what we've been waiting for. And you just mentioned that. That's what I've been waiting for years, because we need to start seeing exits. We need to start being able to show potential of the space. And I think now, not only have we started seeing exits, modern fertility exited, and we've seen massive funding rounds in the fertility benefit space. I think very much led by Maven and Carrot, and also Kindbody. And so we're starting to see the traction there. And in the end, success is going to lead to success. We all, the three of us in this call, need to do our job really well so that we're going to lift the entire industry up.
No, that's wonderful. And I think you gave some really great insights on this point. I think success breeds success. Lea, your closing comment here is the summary, basically. But also, Keren, I like very much your notion around platforms and the need to, because the space is fragmented. So that will help all of you help each other, but it will also make it easier for both investors and perhaps users to find, to understand, to put things together in a good way. Wonderful. So I think moving on, if success breeds success, it's very important, how you run the business. You have all experience in bringing products to market, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about what your lessons learned are, what business models seem to work, and how are you generating your revenue streams. So maybe, Elina, you would like to start by telling us a little bit about your experience.
Yes, for sure. So maybe one difference when Natural Cycles came to market, what is it now, 9 years ago or 8 years ago, one thing that we dared to do differently back then than most other tech apps was that we dared to actually charge for our product. We're a subscription model still today, so users choose to pay around $90 for a yearly subscription, which includes the hardware, or $10 a month, and then they have to buy the hardware separately. And back then, this was really, everyone was supposed to be a free app or have the freemium model, but we saw that we deliver solutions to women in birth control or fertility, something that you otherwise would charge for. And that's and we dared to do that upfront, which also meant that we more quickly had a control of our business. Today, we're actually profitable, which has still taken us a long time, but it's a milestone for us. And we see that.
Congratulations, Elina. That's great to hear.
Thank you.
Really.
And what we also see is that our users value that they are our customers, because they are the ones paying for the service. So we don't have to run ads. We don't have to sell their data. We can put our customers first because we charge for the product. But in the very early days, this was something investors were surprised by. Actually, I was on a call yesterday with an investor, and again, they said, like, is this really optimal? Shouldn't you be freemium model, because maybe you miss out on conversions? But of course, we've we've A/B tested this, but also know that what's right for our customers is that they are the ones in focus, and then they also pay for this product.
Wonderful. No, I think that's a fantastic story, and again, congratulations on being profitable. It is interesting that people then ask you whether freemium would have been a better model. I don't know, Lea, what is your experience on these considerations?
I will not be the right person to tell Elina how to run her business, but I think, you know, we have chosen a completely different path. We're doing an upfront payment still, where we basically charge one time upfront for our service. Again, with the fertility consideration in mind, at the beginning we assumed that women might not like being charged once a month when they're trying to conceive. We wanted to optimize for the journey. And we said, okay, if you're trying to conceive and it takes you longer, should you be charged every month or not? So our assumption there was that people would mind that, and it would lead to additional stress, and then also financial stress, and you also have to pay for this, and it's going to take much longer. But we've actually, in the meantime, done quite a bit of testing, and we know that that's not the case. So we're quite flexible on potentially changing that in the future. But at the moment, we're still an upfront paid solution. We have a hardware component as well, and so that's all in one package.
And what have you learned from your go-to-market? What specific lessons can you share?
Well, I think we did what a lot of digital health companies do. We started as a D2C play. We validated our product with consumers at the same time as building up a lot of clinical evidence and regulatory approvals, and have since very much shifted our focus to B2B, where we think we're more at home in the future. So that's the big shift that we've done. I don't think it's unique for the industry. A lot of healthcare companies do exactly that shift, and that's what our big learning was. But also, I think it's quite expected in a space like ours.
They completely lost me. We have a manufacturing facility, and then we have to do regulatory and quality, and then we have to ship our products and test and validate, and oh my goodness. So no, we're not an app or anything digital. We have physical products that we manufacture and sell, and we have to clean and sterilize and go through a whole MDD now to MDR process. Is such a nightmare. But on the other hand, we were very early on profitable, of course, because there's a physical product that you sell into the market. What I can say from our world is that it's really, really important, despite investors and what they want you to do, is to find one market, small as it may be, and choose to test it. Test not only the product itself, but also the whole operation around the product. How well you can manufacture, how well your distributor knows how to choose the key opinion leaders and the correct pathway into the market, how his operations work. And so really, we have to test a market before we actually go broader and bigger. I can say one thing that I forgot to kind of mention, which is a little funny with the word Femtech, is I don't know if you guys experience this, but on LinkedIn, because Ocon is considered Femtech in some, I don't know, way, that I get all these cloud and app and AI people, approaching me. Do you need help getting your product to the customers? And I'm thinking, yeah, we need to change this. We need to do something else. But so for me, it's very different. It's a physical product. What I did, by the way, in order to make sure that the product works, I don't know about the wonderful entrepreneurs that are here with me, but I tested it on myself. So I'm wearing our product to make sure that it works well. So far, I'm not pregnant, so happy with it. That's the only thing we need to make sure. So yeah, that's our experience.
Thank you. I think all of you mentioned testing, and obviously you have very different products. So obviously the ways you've gone to market are different, and that's very nice to see 3 different stories represented by you and your companies and your successes. So how do you find? Do you think that there are additional challenges in finding your target market? Keren, you mentioned how important it is to select where you start, how you test, how you trial. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about it, because I think especially in this space, Even though the potential is large, given just the proportion of the female population, finding the right target market can be very challenging, I'm sure. So I don't know, Keren, if you want to add from your perspective before moving to your colleagues.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that Ocon is not a young company. We're about a decade old, right? We're 10 years old this year. And I only joined a couple of years ago, but in the beginning, we tested a smaller diameter product, right? It was much smaller, a lot more flexible and softer. And we tried it out in one small country in Europe, and it was a disaster. So we quickly rephased it and built a product that's slightly wider in diameter. That was its performance till this day is very, very good. So yeah, and I have to admit that testing that market initially was extremely important because we learned about the product, we learned about the way women relate to it. Till this day, we still keep those lessons very close to heart. And I can really only attest to the fact that while our investors really want us to push and grow and, expand, it's very difficult with medical devices, even though ours is a medical device class 3. In Europe, you're not allowed to directly expose your product to women. Very different in parts of Africa, very different in the US, very different in Israel. And so you have to really change your marketing approach, even your marketing partner in every single territory that you go. It's very, very challenging to do that. But at the end of the day, I think women leading women's health companies understand what our needs are, how we view products, how we view services. One of the things I tell investors that are men, that what we're doing here, it doesn't matter if it's a product or an app or a service or a diagnostics, we keep women happy and calm. And when you have a calm woman, you have a calm wife or a spouse, a mother, a calm, employee or manager. And so they should probably invest in this space to kind of keep everybody, healthy and sane and calm. So those are my additional, 2 cents on this topic.
I'm happy. Yeah, happy women. Elina, how about you? How did you select your channels and your target markets?
Yeah, we started out with Sweden as our first small proof of concept market, which I think was very good because it's indeed small and still tech savvy, and yeah, we learned a lot. It wasn't easy either because an app for birth control was not really a thing before. So right now, and since quite a few years, we're also medical device class 2, same as the condom, for instance. But it was really not obvious to get there. So when we started out in Sweden, the first thing we did was to ask the regulators, what type of medical device should we be? And then they told us that they do not advise what type of medical device we should be. And it's kind of like a catch-22 infinite loop. And in the end, there had to be like a question to all European countries what kind of medical device we should be, but still no consensus. But we could use that to actually get our way in to get regulated as a class 2 medical device, which kind of unlocked things for us. And we were able to talk about our product, what it actually is a contraceptive medical device, which helped us grow. And then doing the same in the US. And then we moved over here to the US, and now the US is our largest market. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Lea.
Sure. I mean, I've already kind of alluded to the fact that we've really changed to the B2B side. So that's kind of where we found our home. I think specifically we've closed deals with a lot of companies in the fertility benefit space, which we're extremely excited about. And, I think, I think in our space, it still, I think it does make a lot of sense to start direct to consumer. And I think, as Elina just pointed out, it can be profitable to do so and a really good strategy to do so. I think for us, we've decided that there's just more interest from another side, and we're excited on the reimbursement opportunity in the fertility world. Overall, we're also seeing that globally coming in, right? More and more countries globally are starting to reimburse for fertility, and we have clear clinical data that we can reduce costs on that side. So for us, it has become just a really good place to focus on. But I think, as with all startups, you always need to kind of find your perfect fit at some point, and experiment a little bit along the way.
No, absolutely. Just by doing, you learn so many things. I think your point about reimbursement is extremely interesting. So have you or any of your colleagues achieved reimbursement yet, or is this still something that is developing as we speak?
I mean, I'm happy to speak about our situation. I mean, we've started, we're reimbursed for a certain percentage of the US population at this point, which we expect to grow significantly over the next couple of years for the fertility solution.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. That must be, that's a big achievement. There's a question from the audience about sort of, you know, profitability and revenue streams. We haven't really gone in depth on that. Is any of you, or are all of you, prepared to give a little bit of a point of view of what is a reasonable target in this space? What should people imagine, or is that, what do you think? Is that a topic that we can address based on this question?
I'm a bit unclear about what the question is. When you say target, what do you mean exactly? I don't see the question, so that's maybe
goals. That's the question as I see it on my screen. So the op and gross margins. So I think potentially I'm interpreting here the person is interested in the profit margins that you think are achievable or reasonable in this space or in your company. If you're prepared to talk about that more specifically.
I can maybe talk a little bit about natural cycles and how we did manage to get there. I think it has also something to do with what Lea mentioned earlier, that we're somewhere in between the tech world and apps and free apps and also healthcare, where things, you know, take more time and you have to be more cautious and you cannot just move fast and break things. And as also mentioned before, we chose to actually charge for our product rather than just grow the user numbers as fast as possible, but then burn through a lot of capital. So we knew that we wanted to have, this is a long-term play, it takes time, and we wanted to have our destiny in our own hands. So basically what we've done is to grow sustainably. So we haven't really just push the gas pedal and spend as much money on marketing as we can, because we want to grow sustainably and be a bit more cautious, because this is more of a long-term play. So I think it has a lot to do in the end with what's your marketing budget, what's your CAC, your cost per acquisition, and what's the lifetime value of your customer. And what is your strategy to just get as much customers as you can, but then burn through your capital, or do you want to grow a bit more slowly and more sustainable? And that's the approach we took, was the latter.
I think that our business is a lot more affected and it's very, very different. For example, today, the inability for us to make any changes under MDD before we move to MDR is huge, because we lose profit all the time. We can't change our subcontractors. We can't change some of our product configurations. So these lead to a lot of inability to really grow your actual, profit line. What you could do is you could add more countries and add more partners. And we, for example, we are expanding very rapidly into South America. We're expanding into Japan, into Russia. And so that's our way of kind of expanding and growing. But on the other hand, the lesser you can make the cost of goods, which is not so much with an app, but more with a product, I think with us, it's would cater to a huge margin change and shift. So we're going to work hard on our MDR and make sure that, that's something that we will be able to do in the future.
Yeah, that will open up opportunities for you from the side of this. No, thank you. I think these are comments that should hopefully help, and certainly have given me more insight in how you sort of consider, your go-to-market, but also how you can do it how you can grow sustainably. I think is really the trick to find that out. I have an additional question from the floor, and then we will move to our next topic. But about reimbursement, because Lea, you mentioned you are achieving that now, and The question from the participant is, the reimbursement market access landscape is quite fragmented and segmented, different in each country. So how do you go about approaching this? Do you do it on a country by country basis? Is there anything you can share, Lea, from your experience?
It is very fragmented, and it's also shifting, especially in the women's health space. Reimbursement has been shifting quite a bit. So for us, it's a market by market play. We go to the most attractive market first, and then we make sure that we work with the right people on the strategies. And again, it might sometimes be reimbursement also has become a very flexible term. Sometimes that's insurance, sometimes that's benefit providers, and other places it's employers directly. So it's also not the typical, as we sometimes, especially in Europe, think, oh, there's one entity, and then you need to get into that one entity. Every market works differently. So I think you have to have a lot of kind of the feet on the ground per market to achieve reimbursement.
Absolutely. Keren, maybe for your type of product that's different or similar, can you add some perspective from your side?
Thankfully, we have hair dye, so you can't see my white. Very, very difficult. I think that, you retain a CE mark, but every country in Europe is different. Just look at the languages, look at the practices, look at what's available in each market. If you look at France, they love the fact that there's non-hormonal contraception. In some other markets, it's less popular. Eastern Europe, Western Europe. Then we get into areas such as the US, where you have a huge continent. It's all the same language. It's all the same code of reimbursement. Pricing is much higher. So that gives a lot more, focus and ability. But in order to bring products to the US, obviously you have to go through FDA. These are very expensive studies. Again, these are things that you have to qualify physically in women. And so in our experience, very, very difficult. It's almost like, trying to run up a hill, or an uphill battle, as they say, because of this notion. I think that one of the things that I'm learning is that bigger distributors on bigger markets or bigger footprint would probably be easier. But then again, challenges on that hand as well, because they're probably a supermarket that have a lot of products. So, kind of need to see what your product does, how much attention it needs, where the best channels are. But I only think that local partners can do a better job than anyone that we could probably do directly. So that's from our experience.
Yeah, feet on the ground, local knowledge, and Lea, to your point, the multiple stakeholders that can be relevant in terms of being payers, potential payers for the solutions. Thank you. No, that was great on this topic. I'd like to move as our sort of final topic for the afternoon to creating value. There is a huge unmet need in this space in so many aspects of life for people, but for women as well, and still so many areas, screaming out for solutions. What is your mission, your driver? How do you, identify unmet need? Do you have any unmet needs that you still feel are on your to-do list as a company or as a leader in this space? I'd like to really sort of talk a little bit more now about the users, the needs, and what we're doing about that. And maybe, Elina, I can start with you to give your perspective on this.
Yes, definitely. And so our mission is to pioneer women's health with research and passion by empowering every woman with the knowledge she needs to be in charge of her health. And today as I mentioned, we have a platform which is a medical device where we have several products. So the contraceptive product is our number one, but then also fertility and pregnancy. But I think what's really missing, and what we also hear from our users, is a solution for monitoring menopause. And we have developed a concept in this. And I think this is very much in line with our mission, because it's an area where a technical digital solution can really help, and women don't have enough solutions today. So there's something that we feel one day when we have a little bit more maybe time and capital, we will be able to tackle this fourth product and add this to our platform. But it's something we're very excited about.
It's certainly an area of unmet need for sure, and it sort of takes it neatly through the whole life cycle of women and what they experience. Wonderful. Keren.
I recently sat together with my head of marketing and we came up with a sentence. We said, let's stop siding with side effects, right? So a lot of therapies that were created for women were created so many years ago, not really tested. And there's so many side effects that we have to endure with oral formulations. And if we look at women's health as a whole, and look at women's health, from the perspective of the uterus, for example, there's so many disease areas and conditions. Contraception is one of them, but if we look at abnormal uterine bleeding, heavy menstrual bleeding, fibroids, menopause, endometriosis, there's so many different disease areas that we could treat at the target tissue. We don't need to swallow all these oral formulations that, we need to take other additional hormones in order not to hurt our liver, hurt our heart, make sure, we don't perspire and so what we really want to do is move away from these oral formulations, make them or reintroduce them in a form of a uterine delivery technology to make sure we can cater to these diseases specifically for women, specifically for the women's body, and uterus size and contractions, and make sure that we can treat those at the target tissue and not systemically. And I think that's a huge mission we undertook. Elina can also, of course, attest, like she said, if we have a little bit more capital, a little bit more time, yes, we need a lot more capital and a lot more time, because these are expensive hobbies, right? These are medications. You need to prove that they're safe and that they're efficacious. And so, yes, expensive hobbies, funding. I always say the F word. But yeah, that's really our mission, is to move away from side effects, get these therapies where we need them at the target tissue, and make sure those are available to women worldwide.
Another very important set of unmet needs for sure. Thank you. Lea.
I think everyone who attends this conference knows about this, but I'm still going to kind of emphasize it because I think it's really important. We women spend all of our reproductive life either trying to avoid pregnancy, trying to get pregnant, or being pregnant. And then eventually we are in menopause, which Elina already kind of told us about, which is a huge need too. But in the end, when we're trying to conceive, we now know 1 in 8. By now, it is 1 in 6 couples are needing help to get pregnant. Those treatments are still invasive. They're still difficult. They're not always successful. In pregnancy, we have 10 to 15% of all women who experience complications during pregnancy. We have a maternal mortality rate in the US that is still going up instead of down. On the contraception side, we have 1 in 10 women who are already today using fertility awareness-based methods, many of which are taking huge risks when it comes to safety and efficacy of their products that they're using. So we're really, I think any one of us in this panel, the last thing we should say is, we're good, we did our part, this was fun, right? I think the problems are just, there's just white space, right? There's white space right in front of us. And we know that there's this ton of stuff that we still need to do and fix and make better. And I think especially where we're coming from at AVA is we're looking at this as an AI game. We're saying, where can we bring big data in and where can we support women along this journey? And I think for us, it's clear we want to do that over the course of the entire reproductive life cycle. We've started at one point, we're going to go to the other points. But then I think we haven't even started to talk about co-founding factors together with diabetes and other, the women's health world isn't isolated. As soon as we've kind of, quote unquote, fixed certain things within this, we need to start going a step further beyond. So I still think it's great where we are as an industry now. It's great that there's more companies coming. It's great that there's more funding coming in, but we're far away from having reached peak in this industry, far, far, far away. And I think it's very much our responsibility to get there as quickly as possible.
Surely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the unmet need is immense. I also like the point you made about sort of holistic. That's the point about women's health is that in women, many diseases present differently, need different, more tailored solutions. And I think you've all spoken to those points very eloquently, and there is still just so much to do. I think we're coming up to close to the end of this panel session, sadly. But before we close, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity for a quick closing, some quick closing comments. And maybe you can be guided as you do that by my question. What is the one wish you have when it comes to Femtech, women's health? What is the one thing that would make everything different so much quicker? Lea, I'm going to start with you.
I think we alluded to it at the beginning of this conversation. I'd like to have Keren and Elina sell their company tomorrow for a ton of money. And that would be the most helpful thing they can do for this industry. I mean, you know, I'm kidding, but I'm also not kidding. We need more success cases. It's going to lift everyone up. So Keren and Elina, it's on you.
Yeah, I'm going to say the F word, and I mean funding. We really just need funding in order for us to really make big progress. I think that's the key, really the key.
And Elina.
Well, for me, I feel in addition to selling my company tomorrow and definitely funding, also, I think we need more insights. So in terms of data and research, I think we're quite pioneering in this tech space with having published 12 clinical studies and several more in the pipeline, but I feel it's still not enough. I wish I could have more data and more insight. It's maybe because I'm a scientist from the start, but I feel like if we would just have like the perfect data set of all insight into women's bodies and women's health, there will be so much more innovation and solutions. So yeah, to never stop trying to find more data, more research, more insight, then innovation will come, I think.
Wonderful. I think you've wrapped this up beautifully between you. So it's all about funding. It's all about success because that will attract more funding, which means successful exits, which will give confidence to investors. It's about the huge unmet need in this space of women's health, where you and many of your colleagues are doing such inspirational and wonderful things to pave a way forward and to bring solutions to women everywhere. And that is impossible without the data and the insights and the research, as you said, Elina. So I really want to thank you very much. I'm much in awe of what the three of you have achieved and how you've told us about it in this panel session today. So I'd like to thank all of you very much, wishing you a lot of success, and I'll be watching who will exit first, and I will be applauding you from a distance for sure. Thank you very much, wishing you all the best, and Becky, I think it's back over to you.
Thank you so much, Annemijn, and thank you to all of the fantastic panelists. I mean, you know, wonderful to get so many inspirational women together, and your insights were absolutely brilliant. So thank you for taking the time to share with us. I'm sure those watching will agree as well. So that's it, as sort of Annemijn said, for the panel. I'm sure we could have spoken much longer. Please do reach out to those on the panel and sort of those other attendees, sort of, you know, network, communicate. That's what sort of it's all about. For those of you joining us at the Femtech CEO Forum in about 15 minutes, we'll see you there. But otherwise, we're back here in sort of just over an hour with our next session around fundraising and investment. It's all about the money, but this time sort of more US centric as opposed to our European panel this morning. So thank you once again, and I'll see you very soon.